Hello guys, Ben here, and welcome back to the King's Gambit, where I'm actually going through the 2013 book by John Shaw. So we're going to be looking at the main line of Bishop G7 ... Bishop G7 and also 8 ... Knight H5. So you have to go E4, E5. Here, E takes Knight F3, G5, H4, G4, Knight E5, Knight F6, Bishop C4, D5, ED, and now Bishop G7 on this move, 8 D4, and then Knight H5. And this is the main line. And we saw 8 castles kingside, so 2 moves for white to consider are bishop takes f4. What? That looks like a fun sack. And castles. So we're going to look at bishop takes f4 first. Okay, and we won't consider knight c3 because after castles, and yeah, this is just a good position for black, though it still can get complicated. Black should be fine. So bishop takes f4. He says that those who love chaos may be tempted by this move, and it has been extensively analyzed by Stefan Bucher. It's B-U with the umlaut, C-K-E-R. Extensively doesn't really do justice to the massive variations and sub-variations the German FIDE master has published on this line. And he recommends looking at it if that's kind of your thing. However, Shaw has 2 problems with the sack. First, I'm not sure. He's not sure it's sound. I personally like it, but that's just at first glance. And secondly, black has a safe equalizing opt-out clause. Yeah, okay, that's a fair assumption. If white is going to go to the trouble of studying and learning all this lunacy, I would recommend black to be committed also. My research in the line, or Shaw's research in the line, was greatly helped by the work of, Macabre? Okay, it's spelled M-I-C-A-W-B-E-R. And below is a brief summary of their conclusions and Shaw's conclusions. So, knight takes f4. The safe line goes castles, queen d2, knight d7, bishop g5, queen e8. And Shaw says the position is dead equal. So instead, if you want to play like a madman, 10 castles, bishop takes e5, and this is just one option of many in the coming moves and our various possible deviations. So anyway, we've got d takes e5. I have to admit, I really like this center. Like, this center is awesome. In this knight, and we've got pressure here. You know, I actually really think this position is perfectly playable. D takes e5. Knight g6. Getting the knight out of the way. e6. Goodness gracious, you're just going all out for it. Queen takes h4. Queen takes h4, and Shaw says, this move is not highly regarded by previous analysts, but I like its crude greed. F takes e6 is the obvious alternative, but that just looks terrible. Why on earth would you play that? But after, say, knight c3, it's just a complete mess. Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, that's completely accurate. This is a mess. I personally would think something like queen here, bishop here, queen e2. Would black really want to try and trade queens? That doesn't seem healthy. Oh wait, actually it's probably advisable. Takes, I would take with a knight. We've got this. This bishop can't move until stuff happens. And actually that just would lose another piece. So that's not a good continuation. So yeah, okay, this queen g4 idea is no good. I'd be tempted to play here. Okay, well it's black to move. Okay, so here, this looks okay, I think. If bishop here, I would not want to face that just because this looks really strong. I think we take first here, and then, okay, that's the only impressive thing, and not only that, but we're getting behind the pawn. So that's just one possible way. Knight c3 is probably the best, but I'm looking for alternatives. Yeah, knight c3 is definitely the best, and as Shaw says, it's just a complete mess. So queen takes h4, we're going to go back to the main lines. E takes f7 check, king d8, queen to d4, stopping any ideas of this because you just trade, whoops, stopping any ideas of g3 because you trade and promote and you actually win a rook, and black king is still under attack, and I actually think you may be winning material. Queen d4, rook f8 necessary, putting this back on the cards because now this pawn can't promote, so you need to figure out a way to promote it. Queen here might be good, but then you run into that, so no, actually you don't. Okay, rook f8, knight c3, okay, knight. And here, I'll show you why you can't play this. Or actually, why you can. In this position, you can totally play that. Well, actually, no, you can't, but it's a tough position, for sure. Knight c3, knight d7, okay. And d6. And Shaw says, with compensation, according to Bucher. In general, I agree with that assessment, but I think white will have to play very well to level the chances. Certainly, the f7 pawn is the monster, and black king is running scared, but black has an extra piece, and g4 to g3 will soon swap queens. For example, cd, rook ad1, yeah, okay. g3, queen takes, knight takes, rook takes d6, knight g6, and knight e4. Oh yeah, and we'll put king c7 on the board as well. And Shaw says, perhaps it will end up level, but white is one who has to be more careful. If you think this looks like fun for white, then remember 2 points. First, black has a safe opt-out line. Second, there are at least a dozen similarly wild forcing lines to reckon with. If you are an over-the-board player, this is not practical. He should say this is not practical for both colors, because I actually think this looks like an incredibly fun and rich position. You've got white with all of his pieces activated. You've got a monstrous pawn right here on f7. Black has these terrible pieces here. This This knight's also not doing much. I mean, sure, they're controlling this, but this rook has nowhere to go, and it's white to move. And I'm going to be honest, knight here just looks like a very... Okay, so you can't move the knight there. Honestly, why can't I just take the exchange, play here? I'm guarding this, plays here. Okay, cool. I'm going to attack your rook. So if you take, I've got this, and you can't defend that because I'm forking both the promotion square and your king, and material is actually equal. So the idea is you sack the exchange and go here. So you have to take this. I'm going to take your rook and material is equal. Or, yeah, material is equal and black has these weak pawns. So rook takes g6, h takes g, knight g5. And the threat is fairly obvious. And I don't see how you stop this unless you want to allow me to promote, because I'm going to play this next. So I've got two squares. So, okay, so I'm going to go here and delete those moves. So hg, knight g5, and what do you do? This just looks insanely better for white. The only way to stop knight e6 check, which might actually be better, so if we played this, well, I can't do that now because you just got out of the way of it. So that the only way to stop that and not allow that, there is none. I mean, you can stop. Okay, actually, well, that just hangs material, so you can't play that. And now I've got more than enough compensation for the exchange. I've gotten, what was that? I've got two pieces for the exchange, so this rook, the bishop, and now this. So sacrificing the additional exchange, and not only that, but then I'm still threatening this knight here. So to say that black has a bad position is an understatement. King here, I'm still playing this. King here, and maybe we can stop the pawn for like a move or two. And remember, he's gonna have to play this, and well, I'm just going to take that pawn, and now the endgame is draw-ish. It's actually very hard to play this. You have to defend the pawn. I have a majority, so maybe I can make something happen here. I've got good compensation for the piece. In worst case, I trade the pawns off, sack my rook for his rook, and I exchange rooks, and I think I'm fine here. But that's just one of many possible lines, and it's extremely complicated. So I really like this. Then again, knight g, king c7. I really like knight g5 here, even though... So actually knight g5 is terrible. But in this position, you know, we can just take the rook back, and knight g5 is a threat, so h6 has to be played. I still take this pawn, and now I can threaten here with ideas of knight here and then to d6, or to e6. That's pretty good for me, but we're going to leave it at where John Shaw says, okay, this is enough. So we're going to go to the 9 castles king side, which he says is better. In my view, this is white's most sensible choice. Now there are 2 moves, 9 castles, and queen takes h4. So I'm going to input both of those. And which one does he cover first? He covers the castle's king side option. Okay. Rare but not at all bad. Next sequence is compulsory. Okay, so knight takes g4. Queen takes h4. Else you won't be able to. If you took the knight, you wouldn't be able to play this or have threats on the king side. Knight h2. Okay, and I'm guessing the knight's coming back to this square at some point. Black's kingside pawns are very ugly, and the white king is exposed. Rough equality is the verdict, especially if black now makes an accurate choice. f5. Okay, and king h8 was played in Alpin Tarash Osted 1905, but it allowed white to show his threat in the position of bishop e2, threatening the knight, knight g3, rook takes f4, threatening the queen, and I'm trying to figure out what happened because you can't take, well, you could take there with check, but your queen has to get out of dodge. And white has a very good position, in my opinion. So we go back to f5, knight f3, which also gets an exclam. So f5 got an exclam, and this gets an exclam. This is simple and best. You're improving the knight and covering tricks on d4. However, white does have a few other moves that are worth a look. We saw white had a trick against king h8 on move 11, but what happens if he tries the same thing now? Okay, here, bishop e2 is a blunder because of bishop. What? Bishop takes c2. What? That, I don't think that is a move. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so here, f5. Oh, it said bishop f5, not f5. Ha, that was silly. I'm sorry. Bishop f5. Okay, so I misread that. I'm sorry. I'm still going to input this because it's important. Okay, and then after bishop f5, if white were to try this now, you've got this, and the queen has to cover d4. Knight g3 gets an interesting mark, and which has the point that you can't play this because queen takes f4, bishop takes f4, bishop takes d4 check, queen takes d4, and the knight takes here with a better position. And you've got 1, 2, 3, and we've got 1, 2, 3. And it's 5 pawns on 5 pawns, but black has won a rook. Okay, so we need to go back. And then queen d2 here. And knight g3, and black was much, much better. And this was a correspondence game in 1960 between a guy named Lebov and a guy named Bezubov. Clearly this was back in the days when correspondence players missed tactics. Somehow they are so much sharper these days. Correspondence games these days allow you to use engines. That's kind of the joke. Instead, white should be about level after a range of sensible moves, not including knight c3, which also allows bishop takes c2. Although this time it's not so devastating. So instead, so in the main line after bishop here, bishop f5, our main line is not bishop e2. Our main line is knight f3, which I should promote this. Okay. Okay. So this variation gets promoted. Knight f3. An alternative to that is c3, which of course stops anything on this square. And, you know, I would assume it's fine for white, but it's a little silly. Now a natural start is knight d7, bishop e2. Knight df6, protecting this knight. You don't want to move your knight back. And then a sample line would be knight f3 here, queen g3, knight e5. I'm assuming we're looking to try and trap this queen. It seems like something sensible you want to do. And then, so queen g3, knight e5, queen g5. Don't want to get your queen trapped. Queen g5, c4. Okay. Bishop e4, mate threat. Bishop f3, stopping mate. Knight g3. Bishop takes e4. Knight takes f1. Queen takes f1. Knight takes e4. Bishop takes f4. Queen h4. And knight c3. And somehow we have a position where white is down in exchange, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 5 pawns, so he has a pawn for his exchange, and he's got 2 knights versus bishops of the same color. His opponent has 1 knight. White, I would say, has better pieces, but I think it's pretty equal. So now let's return to the best moves. So 12 knight f3, queen g4, and then knight e5 is given an interesting, not compulsory, but a sensible and direct approach. A possible continuation would be queen takes d1, followed by rook takes d1, bishop takes c2, and then rook e1. And white has good compensation. The exchange of queens changes the status of the h5 knight from a dangerous attacker to an awkwardly placed defender of doubled pawn. Yep. Okay, so we're going to go back to the greedy 9 takes queen h4. The obvious move, and one which forces an exchange of queens, queen e1. Well, does it really force exchange of queens? Oh yeah, because if here we're on the queen, and black trades queens, rook takes e1, and again, 2 lines, the surprising knight d7. Where are we? Okay. Queen. I'm going to promote this variation. Okay, there we go. Now it's actually showing up for me. Knight d7. And the other alternative is castles kingside. Okay, both seem to make sense. Knight d7. This quirky idea was mentioned by Bucher with the clever thought that the king might be useful on d8. White has many checks but no cruncher. Okay, 3 moves are worth studying from this position, according to Shaw. You have knight g4 check. You have okay, so after knight g4 check, you have bishop b5. Okay. Okay, there we go. Bishop b5. And knight c3. There we go. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to promote this variation. Okay, there we go. So and we should be on move. So we're on the knight d7 lines with knight g4, bishop b5, and also, nope, not that one. Knight g4. What? That's not the position we're looking at. Knight d7 is the line we're looking at. That is definitely not... Okay, something went wacky. So it's in a position where the queens are off. Queen e1. That's definitely not it. So instead of that, we go, that is definitely not it. Promote the variation. Okay, so that's where we are. You're seeing this, right? Okay, so we want to look at the knight d7 lines. And the first one we're going to look at is actually knight g4, which instinct suggests this should be good for white, but it can be surprisingly messy. Okay, for example, king d8, knight e5, knight takes e5, d takes e5, rook e8. Yeah, okay, king should be good on that square. e6, and then bishop d4 check. And white must choose with care, not f1 of course, but h2 or h1 are possible. For example, king h1, f takes, and then d takes. Clarity has yet to appear. The e6 pawn could be strong or weak, but this looks like a good playable position for both colors. I do think white should probably invest time in playing c3, knight here, here, and finding out what to do with this bishop. Because that knight is guarding a pawn that is keeping this bishop from doing anything useful. As well as this bishop here. So white needs to get this bishop out. Okay, so we're going to look at bishop e5 now. This move is valuable as an illustration of the dangers of neglecting development, but it stops black castling, you say. Okay, castles. Given an exclaim, white must take on d7 or else he has lost time for nothing. So knight takes. Even worse. So worse is bishop takes. Okay, so bishop takes. There we go. Bishop takes. Knight takes. Bishop takes d4 because you're losing squares for your knight to retreat, and black will actually pick it back up. King h2, and then it says rook fe8. Really good there. Really good there. Rook fe8. And two things become clear. The d7 knight is trapped, and the white king is in trouble. For example, rook d1, bishop f2, bishop takes f4, rook ad8, declining the sack, knight f6, check, knight takes f6, knight c3, and then knight h5, and yeah, black has an advantage. Black has an advantage. That's all I'm going to say about the situation. g3 might be useful, but really, this position is kind of like not good. There's good and there's not good, and I'd rather have black in this position. So we're going to go. So knight takes d7 is our main line right now. Bishop takes d4 check. Good intermediate move. King h2. Not worrying about this because your king is pretty okay on either of these squares. I'd probably play your king here just to keep it safe, but this might be interesting. To rook d8. Okay, threatening the knight. This line is trickier than 13 bishop takes d7, but as a d7 knight can wriggle free, but black still has the advantage. Okay, rook d1, bishop f2, knight goes back to e5, and then a6, kicking the bishop. c6 is similar in this position. Okay, a6 is our main line in this position. Then, okay, so bishop goes back to f1, as Ben Feingold says. Always play bishop f1, rook e8, targeting this. Knight d3, it's useful. g3 check. King h1, bishop g4, and it says black has an advantage. White must give up the exchange when the count will be 2 minors against a rook and 2 pawns. The ugly location of the white king is a major theme. The rook goes after, say, rook here, bishop e3, or just knight c3 in this position. Okay. Okay, so instead of bishop e5, we're going to look at knight c3, which is Shaw's recommendation. That's not knight c3. Okay, so knight d7, knight c3 is the recommendation by John Shaw in this position, okay? When in doubt, develop. Knight takes e5. Shaw says, 12, castle and kingside here transposes into a line that he's going to show and says, this is the wisest choice, but instead we'll look at knight takes e5, d takes e5. White's center is reborn and he has an enjoyable play. Let's see 2 examples. King d8, exclam, Soviet chess school. No. This may look odd, but it covers c7 and vacates the e-file. There is a downside, 14 g3, which is highly recommendable for some reason. But the ideal tech, okay, so after g3, the point is that the point of playing king d8 is after, what was it? It says knight e2, which I don't know why you would play. You get to play bishop takes e5, defending this. However, the text move, or not the text move, but the best move, is f takes g, bishop g5, which is check, by the way, f6, bishop h4 with advantage, and white has a winning attack. You could say that, yeah. So we have to go back and play bishop f5 on move 13 instead of king d8. Bishop f5 is going to be our main variation. Now 14 knight e2. 14 knight e2. Bishop takes c2. Knight takes f4, knight takes f4. I'm going to guess bishop takes f4. And white is slightly better, much better center. And I really like white's position. And white has more than sufficient compensation for the pawn. So we're going to go back and instead of taking the knight, we're going to castle. So after knight c3, okay, well, we can just transpose, since that's what Shaw recommends. So 11 castles kingside, the obvious move. So knight c3, knight d7, putting pressure on e5 before white can play knight e2. I don't want to show the contrasts. For example, 12 c6, knight e2, promises white good play. For example, after knight d7, actually we'll go ahead and no need to show this, because this is starting to get long, and I'm trying to, and I want to finish this section pretty quick. We've only got like 2 pages left, so I'll just read it out. So after 12 ... c6, instead of the knight d7, but we're transposing into it, knight e2, then knight d7. So in this position, just to show you the position that's on the board here, knight d7, knight takes f4, and this is the position that we're showing. Bishop takes e5, instead of ... knight takes e4. I won't show that. Instead of knight takes e4, bishop takes f4. Knight b6 allows white the option of d takes c6, which means that after, say, knight takes c4, c takes b7, bishop takes b7, knight takes c4, bishop d4 check, bishop e3. I would claim a tiny edge for white due to his healthier pawn majority. The knight is no weaker than a bishop. with knight d6 one powerful option in the near future. Okay. So after 14 bishop takes e5, we get d takes e5, knight takes f4, bishop takes f4, knight b6, bishop d3, knight takes d5, bishop g5, and white has ample compensation, and this is from a game, Cousins versus Dunn, email 1999. So we have to go back a little bit to after knight d7. So instead of the c6 move. So after castles, knight c3, d7, say, okay, so it is knight b5, and white has other moves of note. There are now 3 moves we should have a look at. Oh my word. c6, c5, and knight takes e5. So the first move we'll look at is c6. Most common move, but still an inaccuracy because of d takes c. And black hopes to see knight c7 instead of d takes c. Because after c takes d5, knight takes a8, instead of grabbing the rook, white could be about level after various moves of the c4 bishop. I shall omit the tedious details as they are irrelevant, and black is in control after d takes c4, bishop d2, knight takes e5, d takes e5, f5, knight c7, bishop takes c2. In the well-known game Robert Byrne, Kara's Moscow 1955, black's bishop and 3 pawns were too much for the poor rook to handle. So instead, after d takes c6, knight takes e5, c takes b7, rook b8. No better is bishop takes b7, d takes e5 with advantage. So after d takes e5, I would very honestly be tempted to throw this intermediate move in, just taking the bishop. I don't know why that is. I don't think that's bad. As a matter of fact, I know for a fact that can't be bad. Take the bishop, take this, and now you've got 2 minor pieces and 2 rooks versus the same. Though apparently this is better. Like I said, I'm not sure why this isn't better. It's probably because, oh yeah, you'd be losing this, so you'd actually lose the minor piece. Okay, so you do actually have to take this. Yeah, so I was correct. This is better. I think, if I'm reading the analysis correctly, if I'm looking at the position on the board. Okay, so d takes e5, rook takes b7, b3, bishop e6, knight d6, rook d7, bishop a3, bishop takes c4, and b takes c4. And Shaw says in Skoniexi Graziani's email 2003, pawn structure was decidedly odd, but white's knight was beautiful and aptly supported by the passed c pawn. He's talking about this pawn because this pawn it's fast. It's really fast. And of course this rook goes to this file, and that's really good. and white is definitely winning here. So we go back, and instead of c6, c5 is apparently better. So we're going to look at c5. An illogical move, black offers a choice of transposing, which is cool, or the added option, which honestly I don't see a reason not to transpose, or the added option of knight c7. One logical follow-up is, and actually this is text. As a matter of fact, we'll go ahead and look at the text. Knight c7, rook b8, d6. That pawn is getting scary. Knight b6, d takes c5, knight takes c4. I'm going to guess knight takes c4. Bishop d4 check. King h2, and white has a massive advantage, or white has an edge. For example, after bishop f5, not bishop takes c5, which leads to rook e5, which of course forks that and you're losing a piece, believe it or not. Knight d5, and white has slightly the better of it. So we go back. That's fine. I still would transpose, but okay. So instead, knight takes e5 is the other option. D takes e5, c6. He says it's, the knight takes e5 is simple and best. Knight c7. White doesn't have much of a choice because after d takes c6, b takes c6, knight c7, rook b8 is simply good for black. C takes d5. Bishop takes d5. As in the lines above, knight takes a8, d takes c4 is an exchange sack. White should avoid rook b8. And after some forcing play, we have a branching point. We shall consider e6, c4, and c3. So e6 is a lunge that backfires. I would agree that the move doesn't make sense. You're opening up a line for his bishop. And speaking of opening up a line for his bishop, bishop takes d4 is the refutation. This is the problem, is this, and this check is a pain in various lines, explaining my fondness for c3. So instead, bishop takes e6, knight takes e6, rook b e8 is a clever idea, but after 19, bishop d2, the game is about level. So king, and that's instead of bishop d4. So we're talking about this line instead of this line. So king h1, f takes e6, knight takes e6, rook f5, and there is little to fear from the discovered checks. And one line is bishop takes f4. Knight takes f4, knight takes f4 check. And king f8 is said to be about equal. Or not about equal. Black is a little bit better. So we have to go back to 17 instead of e6, which Shaw doesn't like. C4 is a progressive natural move, but a later bishop d4 check is the dark side. For example, bishop d7, king h1 to sidestep the check, I would assume. Bishop takes e6. Oh, I skipped a line, huh? So after bishop d7 here, though honestly probably king h1 wouldn't be, no, you get forced back in there and that would be terrible. Okay, so sorry about that. e6, white has no good alternative to this move. For example, bishop d2, rook b c8 with the point of knight b5, bishop takes b5, c takes b5, rook f d8, or 18a4, rook b c8, knight b5, rook c e8, and e5 falls. So in this position, bishop d4 check, king h1, bishop takes e6, knight takes e6, knight g3 check is one move to consider, and he says this leads directly to a draw after king h2, f takes e6, bishop takes e6, king h8, bishop takes g4, rook f6, bishop takes f4, rook takes f4, king takes g3, and I can see how this is becoming drawish. Rook bf8, king h3, oh, that's h4, sorry, king h3, rook 4f6, bishop h5, rook f5, bishop g4, and then rook here. And this was a game that Zidu Hartman emailed 2001. Or if we go back to knight g3, check. Instead of knight g3, okay, so we're going to go move different. Rook be8. And that's a way for black to fight on. For example, bishop takes f4. F takes e6. Rook takes e6. Rook takes e6. Bishop takes with check. And king g7. And despite the fact that white has the bishop pair, it's white who has to play accurately to hold. The problem, as usual, is the king is here, not closer to the center. So we're going to go back to, instead of c4, c3. Okay? And, wow, we're actually going to finish before an hour. Okay, a solid and productive move. Best play leads to a rook ending where white is microscopically better. Okay? It says rook d8. b3, or sorry, bishop b3, keeping just a little tension instead 18 e6 leads to level play after 18 bishop e6 takes e6, bishop takes e6, f takes e6, knight takes e6, rook d7, knight takes f4, knight takes f4, bishop takes f4, rook f8. So we're going to go on with the main line. So king f8, so after bishop b3, king f8, that's weird. Knight d5, okay. Bishop h6, holding on to the pawn. Rook f1, adding more pressure. Bishop e6, knight takes f4. Knight takes f4, bishop takes f4. And king g7 exclam, and not bishop takes f4, bishop takes e6. So instead, that would just be terrible because that loses a piece. Or, no, it doesn't lose a piece, but you give white a great open file and a pawn, and he's got some really good pawns. And then king h2. It should obviously be a draw, but white can still ask some questions. For example, instead of king h2, bishop takes h6, king takes h6, rook f6, check, king g5, bishop takes e6, f takes e6, rook takes e6 is no threat for black after rook d2 or even rook e8. So conclusion for this chapter is that the main line of the bishop g7 variation, which is 8d4, knight h5, white's first decision is between bishop takes f4, the interesting sacrifice, and castle's kingside. Bishop takes f4 is chaotic and entertaining, but wildly impractical. Black can choose between equalizing or diving into murky complications. Castling is the right move for an over-the-board player. As we have seen, there are many details both sides should know, but in general, white is pressing. Overall, the bishop g7 variation is a respectable defense, but this section and the previous one have shown many challenging ideas for white. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and, well, we will see you guys next time. Trying to, there we go, there is all the insanity. There we go. So we will see you guys next time when we cover section 3, which is 7 ... bishop d6, which I actually prefer. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. See you guys.